Hi everyone, Dave Sugden of Evidence at Trial. Today we're going to talk about social media evidence, and it seems that this is something that's now coming up all the time in litigation, and yet there can be uncertainty when it comes to questions of admissibility. And so what we're going to do is look at the rules, both in California and in federal court, to make sure that we don't get tripped up. And so what we're going to do is learn a step-by-step method when it comes to social media to make sure that we get it right every time we face these issues. So let's start now. The first thing we want to ask ourselves when encountering social media, any information in a case is this evidence? And if yes, what kind of evidence is it? And we're going to start with the basics. And I know what you might be thinking, which is, well, no, I know this is evidence. Let's jump to the hard topics of authentication. That's the hard part. But let me suggest that how we address these first basic questions and doing so in a precise way can make what seems to be the more difficult questions much easier down the road. And so, when it comes to information on social media, the question, is it evidence? The answer is yes, but let's base it not just on our intuition, but the rules themselves. And so, for example, in California, Evidence Code Section 140 defines exactly what evidence is. And what it says is evidence includes testimony, it includes writings, it includes material objects, and other things. In other words, almost anything can be evidence if it is something that is then presented to our senses to either prove or disprove the existence of a fact. Now, what are writings? Writings are defined in Section 250. 250. And the definition is fairly long. It's about a paragraph long, and it's very broad. In fact, what it says, among the language it includes, is recording anything on almost any medium. And the type of things that can be recorded are words, letters, sounds, symbols, or any combination thereof. And so what that means is, when we're talking about evidence, it can be very broad. And so, for example, if we're talking about a letter, what is that? It's a writing. How about an email? That's also a writing. What about a tweet? One of these 140-character tweets? That is a writing. How about graffiti on a bathroom wall? Same thing. It's a writing. Now, in the federal rules, we have Federal Rule of Evidence 1001. And that likewise provides very broad definitions for things like documents, photographs, recordings. And again, when we're talking about social media, this is the type of evidence that we're talking about. Why is that important? Because the type of evidence dictates the type of rules we must follow when it comes to authentication. So, do we now get to authentication? Not yet. And the reason why is because when we ever encounter any social media evidence, or really any evidentiary question, we want to address it in a hierarchy of order. The first one we always want to ask ourselves is first, is the evidence relevant? Because if it's not relevant, we don't even have to deal with questions of foundation or authentication. And again, rather than going on our intuition, let's go to the rules. And so, in California, the definition of relevance is found in Section 210. And it defines relevance as evidence that goes to the credibility of the witness or hearsay declarant, and evidence that has any tendency in reason to prove or disprove a disputed fact that is of consequence to the action. That's relevance. Same thing in the federal rules. You have Federal Rule of Evidence 401. And 401 has two subparts, A and B, And the definition is very close. It says that evidence is relevant if it has a tendency to make a fact more or less probable than it would be with or without the evidence. And then B, it's of consequence in determining the action. And so that's what we want to look at when we're looking at social media evidence. Is it relevant? Apply that rule. Then we get to authentication. And so to solve authentication, I want you to now go to video 2. I'm going to break up this series into 3 videos to make sure we all understand it. So be sure to check out video 2.